An hour ago, light from outside the door poured into the room. Polly was sitting at the table, having a meal with even Gunther and the Dark Knight. She glanced at him and thought to herself, I absolutely can't talk to the Dark Knight. He must have seen me yesterday. She stared at him and thought further, and he hasn't said a word since. He's probably really upset. He, however, paid her no attention at all and was deep in his own thoughts. What exactly was Papa trying to write about life experiences? Egan Gunther noticed that the Dark Knight hadn't touched his food and spoke up. Sir, is the food not to your taste? The road ahead is still long. It's better if you eat a little. The Dark Knight looked at Egan Gunther and replied, No, it smells delicious. It's just that this soup seems to have a strange scent. Did you put something special in it? Egan Gunther smiled and explained, It's just some secret spices. Every noble house has its own recipe. The Dark Knight looked down at the bowl of soup in front of him and said, Is that so? Well, I'll have to try it then. Polly held her fork in her mouth, her eyes sparkling with excitement inside. That's right, the Dark Knight hasn't eaten anything since yesterday. She thought happily, if he eats now. At that moment, the Dark Knight raised his hand and placed it on his mask. Polly eagerly watched, thinking he's definitely going to take the mask off now. Suddenly, he pulled his mask down just a little and poured the entire bowl of soup into his mouth without even taking the mask off. Egan Gunther exclaimed in surprise, Oh. Polly wasn't any less shocked, her mouth hanging open. That works too? She felt utterly frustrated, unable to believe it. No way. Then she suddenly froze, feeling a bit off. She gasped in surprise, Hey. Polly quickly reached out to steady her, her head spinning a little. What's going on here? Egan Gunther's tone suddenly shifted. Oh, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. He glanced at her, a sleek grin spreading across his face. Just a little secret seasoning. Papa hurriedly burst through the door, stopping right at the threshold and shouting, The Holy Maiden has been spotted by the Demon King's soldiers. Quickly, he stopped mid-sentence, sensing that something was wrong in the air and fell silent. Egan Gunther Brad tilted his head, glancing at her with a wicked smile. Humph. Papa looked around at the three of them, noticing that Polly and the Black Knight were both slumped on the table, while only Egan Gunther was still alert. Suddenly, the Holy Maiden's weak voice rang out, calling to her, Papa, run! Then her head fell onto the table. Papa rushed over in panic, yelling, Holy Maiden, what have you done to her? She turned to him, her voice rising in anger as she exposed him. So it was you. You betrayed the Holy Maiden. Those Demon King soldiers, you're the one who brought them here. He sat comfortably at the table, laughing, and then calmly confessed, It was me. But what do you mean by betrayal? I simply made the right choice according to the bigger picture. Besides, who gave a vile creature like you the right to question me? As soon as he finished speaking in a fit of anger, he grabbed a nearby plate and slammed it into Papa's head, knocking her to the ground. Polly heard the noise and struggled to open her eyes. She called out in pain, Papa. Using the last of her strength, she sat up and called out to the person next to her, Sir Black Knight. Egan Gunther stood up and walked over to her. With malice, he said, My Lady Saint, don't tell me you're still hoping this knight can save you. He then stepped behind her and placed his hands on the shoulders of the Dark Knight, explaining, You shouldn't underestimate the secrets of noble houses. The potion you drank earlier is an ancient, top-tier elixir, a secret remedy known as the Windless Secret Medicine, revered as a semi-divine brew. He pushed the Dark Knight's head down onto the table to prove his point, saying, If you don't believe me, just look. He can't move a muscle. He stood there, watching her lie helpless and powerless on the table, savoring his victory with smug satisfaction. Lady Saint, your fate has already been sealed. He bent down close to her and started to ramble, the way you're so dedicated to your followers, taking care of our lost sheep and guiding them to believe in our God. He then straightened up and made a formal suggestion. Why don't you offer yourself as a sacrifice? I'll hand you over to the Demon King's army and secure you a future full of wealth and power. Papa, holding a knife, lunged at him when he wasn't paying attention. She swung the knife straight at him, but even Gunther quickly dodged. He glared at her and shouted, You're trying to ambush me. Papa stood in front of Polly, holding the knife to protect her. She warned him, Stay back. Despite the blood streaming down her face, she gritted her teeth and warned him again, Don't come near the Saintess. Before she could finish, he stepped forward, kicked her hard in the head, and yelled, You're nothing but a heartless wolf. I wasted so many years raising you. Holding the key in his hand, he leaned toward Papa heard him mention his mother and felt a surge of anxiety. Hastily, he said, Mother, hasn't she already escaped? Egan Gunther curled his lips into a mocking smile as he pulled open a drawer and said to Papa, You believe that? He yanked a suitcase out of the drawer and tossed it onto the ground. Egan Gunther's wicked smile deepened as he coldly pointed at it. Open it. See what's inside. Papa quickly unlatched the suitcase, and inside lay a fur. She stared at it in shock, unable to hold back her tears as memories of her mother flooded her mind. Papa's voice, warm and gentle, echoed in her ears once more. That's your mother. Papa clutched the fur in agony and let out a piercing scream. Suddenly, her eyes flew open. Her pupils turned a fiery red, long and narrow, flashing with a dangerous light. Out of nowhere, crimson lightning streaked across, striking her head and engulfing her entirely. Papa recalled the moment when she and her mother had been fleeing. All of a sudden, her mother stopped, placed a firm hand on her shoulder, and said solemnly, "Papa, if we keep running like this, they'll catch up to us sooner or later. We'd have to split up and run now." Papa looked at the dark, heavy suitcase he had thrown to her, and she sank back into her memories. She remembered when her mother told them they had to scatter and run like that. Papa, terrified, could only cry out, "But can we really not escape?" Her mother gently comforted him, saying, "We will escape, I promise. Once it's safe, make sure you come find me." She kissed Papa's forehead, then promised, "We'll return to the steppe where we used to live. Maybe we'll stay by the river where you like to fish. I'll be waiting for you there." The Papa of today stood frozen, lost in thought. Back then, he really had listened to his mother and ran off in a different direction. As she ran ahead, her mother had turned to watch her, a soft smile on her face. In a quiet voice, as if giving him one last piece of advice, she whispered, "Don't stop. Don't look back." The pain was unbearable, but that bastard Egan Gunther kept digging into Papa's heart, saying, "That's right. To protect you, the daughter, that white-eyed wolf really did turn into a big, terrifying wolf. The mother you always remembered is dead. The Saintess who gave you hope, she's dead too. Pretty angry, aren't you?" At the moment when he was still loudly mocking Papa, she was still holding the suitcase with her mother's fur, surrounded by an intense aura of red energy. Suddenly, 3 men kicked open the door. Egan Gunther spoke up, saying, "Except for those beastmen with special talents who can freely unleash their transformation instincts, there are also those who rely on powerful emotions within themselves. Rage, despair, awaken." As soon as he finished speaking, her expression suddenly changed, becoming somewhat fierce. The chubby man with brown hair, seeing Papa in the process of awakening, sneered at Egan Gunther and said, "Boss, I didn't expect you'd still have one like this." Egan Gunther interrupted him, saying, "Stop talking nonsense. Have all the slaves been evacuated from the manor yet? I don't want to lose any more assets." Egan Gunther looked at Papa with amusement and said, "Wait a little longer. She's not fully awakened yet. Once she completely transforms into the white wolf, then..." Before he could finish his sentence, the scene before him left him stunned, and he could only stare in shock. The chubby man with brown hair was suddenly attacked by Papa. In just a few seconds, he was killed on the spot, causing the others to gasp in fear. What's happening? This is nothing like before. Papa opened her mouth and howled, revealing sharp fangs. The 2 men who had been standing still with the chubby man were also swiftly killed by her. Egan Gunther, trembling all over, could only watch in horror as everything unfolded before him. He was terrified, unable to believe his eyes. It can't be. With a slave contract, how could you kill someone? Could it be? Egan Gunther looked over at Polly, who was still struggling against the effects of the drug. That crazy woman already broke the contract. Papa slowly approached him from the door. She lowered her head and said, "I want to." Then she lifted her head to face Egan Gunther. Her eyes were filled with rage as she screamed, "Kill you." Egan Gunther instantly shrank back, trying to defend himself. "No, you have to listen to my explanation." Suddenly, Papa stopped in her tracks as footsteps approached, followed by a voice, "White wolf people." Flem calmly entered, arms crossed. "I remember that in the legends of the beast people, the white wolf tribe can transform and possess the bloodline of ancient gods. I didn't expect it to be true." Papa, furious, turned to face her and shouted, "The Demon King's army won't allow you to come near the Saintess." Flem stared at Papa for a moment before speaking. "To still struggle under the pressure of a saint-level aura. You've only awakened part of your bloodline's power, and you're already this strong. Truly rare." She watched as Papa charged toward her, clicking her tongue in regret. "Too bad." Flem stood calmly, unafraid. Then she simply activated a barrier to stop Papa. After colliding with the barrier, Papa was injured, spitting blood, and sent flying back, crashing into the wall, with blood splattering everywhere. Flem spoke up, warning, "You better know who you're gritting your teeth at." She then turned to Egan Gunther, lightly adjusting her glasses, and asked, "Did you notify the Demon Lord's army? What's your name?" He seemed like a drowning man clinging to a rope, quickly replying, "I'm originally a noble from this place. I've always wanted to serve the Demon Lord's army, so I borrow their name to keep those 2 wanted criminals here in the mansion." He bowed respectfully, as if pledging his loyalty to Flem. "I was just waiting for you, my lord." Flem looked down at him from her high position, nodding in approval. "Well done. The Demon Lord's army never forgets its loyal servants. Once this is over, it's not impossible for us to grant you a noble title." Feeling like he'd hit the jackpot, he joyfully thanked her. The Saintess and that dark knight are both here. They drank the secret potion, and now they can't move anymore. Upon hearing this, she furrowed her brow and glared angrily. The Dark Knight. This is completely contrary to the Imperial Army's code. How bold. Egan Gunther was trying to win favor, so he quickly ran over and touched the Black Knight, who had just joined in, saying, "That's right, really bold. I'll help you tie them up." Before Egan Gunther could do anything, the Black Knight grabbed his face with a tight grip, causing him to gasp in surprise. "Ha!" A familiar voice echoed. "All right." The Black Knight stood up, shot him a quick glance, and continued. "The show's over." Annoyed, Egan Gunther asked the Black Knight, "You clearly drank it all earlier, so why are you affected?" The Black Knight turned the question back on him. "Why wouldn't I be? Didn't you see she didn't come close?" Flem took off his glasses, answering arrogantly, "You think you can run from me? If you were so easily affected by that drug, that would be the biggest insult to me." He placed his hand on Egan Gunther's head, glanced at her, and suggested, "How about we make a deal? You let us go, and I'll let him go." Egan Gunther cowardly shouted, "Please, master, save me." Flem found it amusing and replied, "Oh, you want me to let go of a major criminal who's disrespected the Imperial Prince for a useless human? How does that sound to you?" With that, her eyes grew sharp, and she began attacking him. Egan Gunther cried out loudly, quickly pulling Egan Gunther down to dodge a blow from her. The Black Knight glanced at her and said in a deep voice, "You're right. That was a stupid question. Now wait for me to take my revenge." With that, he slammed Egan Gunther's head onto the table, causing blood to splash everywhere. As he looked at the person on the table, he thought to himself, "Earlier, this guy slammed my head into the table." Suddenly, I remembered, the Black Knight sat at the table and moved the computer mouse, revealing a news article. A disaster had just struck the port town of Bastia. A huge white wolf had suddenly appeared, leveled half of the town, and then vanished without a trace. The noble in charge of the port was also missing. The cost of goods in surrounding areas had risen by 10%, and income from combat had dropped by 10%. He quietly speculated. This event is a sign of the White Wolf Papa's arrival in the midst of flames and destruction spreading everywhere. A scroll fell from inside, showing Papa roaring, his eyes shining brightly. This was where Papa first awakened as the White Wolf. His sudden appearance, along with the Saintess, had pushed the event forward. If they hadn't come here, Papa would have lived a life of complete ignorance. Thinking this, he quickly dashed across the table. He absorbed the familiar things from his daily life, only to face the risk of losing them. He landed disappearing and reappearing, moving toward Flem. He looked at Papa, who lay helplessly on the ground. Though unconscious, he still clung tightly to his mother's fur. He started to speculate, realizing the tragic fate of his mother had fully awakened him, and his bloodline had turned into that of the White Wolf. He flattened half of the harbor, then by chance joined a strong team that had lost its continent, which would later become his enemy. Meanwhile, Flem began to cast a spell. She used an advanced technique, the Chew Web of Speed. A huge, enchanting pink thread appeared, growing larger and larger, stopping right above the Black Knight's head. The thread shot down toward him, turning into enormous needles. As he dodged, he thought about everything, but now, everything had changed. Perhaps Papa hadn't fully awakened because of his worry for the Saintess, still holding on to some part of his reason. Maybe there was a way to change her fate. Fate was on my side. After evading the tangled threads, he quickly charged toward Flem, suddenly feeling something was off, causing him to cry out. After realizing that the threads had somehow wrapped around him, he gasped in surprise and muttered, "This is." Flem smiled, clearly enjoying seeing him caught up. She explained, "True silk threads aren't something you can easily see like this." Then she began focusing to activate her divine realm. The Black Knight quickly flew up, avoiding her attack. He was stunned and thought, "I never expected she knew how to use this combo." Flem was able to control her lower body to create a mischievous combo. Against most enemies in the game, she could kill them easily. He stared at her coldly. Behind Flem, a terrifying, monstrous spider appeared. She raised both hands, calling upon her power, then loudly declared to him everything she had been holding inside. "I apologize for my past disregard for you. You are extremely dangerous and must be completely eradicated. You are an opponent worthy of me using all my strength to defeat." Her eyes were bright with intensity, her posture ready for an attack as she threatened the Black Knight. With those words, the gigantic spider lunged toward him, intent on striking. Its enormous, sharp legs seemed poised to pierce him through. Suddenly, a loud explosion rang out, and dirt and rocks flew everywhere, filling the air with dust. Flem couldn't believe it. She gasped in shock and exclaimed, "No way." From the midst of the smoke, the deep voice of the Black Knight echoed, "I remember this move requires quite a bit of accumulated anger to unleash." It seems like she was really angry. He only needed one hand to grab hold of the giant spider's leg, then coldly said, "Sorry, Flem. If I get the chance to return, I'll find a way to make it up to you." With those words, the Black Knight snapped its leg, then cast an attack spell on it. He flew up and used his beams of light to latch onto every part of the spider's body. In just one move, the massive spider was instantly torn apart, blood pouring out everywhere. Flem stared in shock, silently processing. How could this be? Just one punch? How could there be an adventurer with such skill? I can't even move a step. Am I scared? Suddenly, her expression changed as she looked at him and internally rejected the thought, "No, that's not it. I'm in my own domain, but it's being suppressed." Inside her mind, everything was slowly falling apart. Polly collapsed onto the table, trembling as she hit the floor. She tried to calm herself down. This wasn't a real fight. It was just a joke. It was like a mischievous child on a stage using a wooden sword to attack a grandmaster, only to be easily defeated, even more embarrassingly so. The Black Knight slowly walked toward Polly and Egan Gunther. Egan Gunther woke up, his face swollen, covered in blood, and in a daze he asked, "What happened?" Before he could finish his sentence, a foot stomped on his head, making his already miserable state even worse. The Dark Knight stepped forward, standing over Egan Gunther's broken form. His face was contorted in pain. He carried the Saintess over his shoulder and spoke calmly, "Miss Saintess, we should leave now." She, weak from being carried, softly urged him, "Papa, what about Papa? Take her too." The Dark Knight interrupted her, his tone cold as he replied, "I know." Then, with his other hand, he lifted Papa up. The window, which had been intact, suddenly shattered. He plunged through it, carrying both of them as shards of glass scattered everywhere behind him. As soon as they landed on the grass, Papa regained consciousness. She clenched her teeth in rage and declared, "I will kill him, kill him." The Dark Knight stayed silent, merely glancing at her while he quietly pondered. Egan Gunther was still alive, and the air was thick with the smell of blood and decay. This place had become Papa's obsession, something he couldn't let go of even in death. If it weren't for this place being destroyed, Papa would have returned for revenge, no matter how far he ran. She would have come back to wipe out the harbor town, and step by step, become a terrifying semi-divine white wolf. He walked away lost in thought, so the end of this scene was really just the beginning. This was a huge gamble. Let me help her get her revenge. As he finished speaking, his eyes turned cold, almost terrifying. The chains, like vines, began to slither into the castle. A blood-red hue engulfed the place as if thirsting for blood, wanting to stain the entire castle in crimson. Egan Gunther, bruised and with a few teeth missing, still managed to lift his head and ask, "What happened now?" Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock as he looked up. The answer came in the form of a red lightning bolt striking him directly. He could only scream in agony. The lightning hit the ground with such force that it cracked the earth open. He died with his face contorted, lying face down in a pool of blood. It seemed like there couldn't possibly be a more tragic death for him. Flem, inside the castle, frowned and squinted at the scene unfolding. But just then, a huge explosion sounded, tearing everything apart, including Egan Gunther's body. The Holy Scepter glanced around in panic. "This is a terrifying type of magic. Don't tell me it's from a Gasma powerhouse. Even legendary experts from ancient times never had this kind of reckless power." The Holy Scepter broke out in a cold sweat and turned to the Black Knight, silently asking, "Who is he? Why does his magic carry an aura I absolutely despise?" The castle had fallen into ruins. Looking at the scene, Flem wondered, why spare me? The moon rose high, casting its light on the Dark Knight's figure. Behind him, the Saintess and Papa were sleeping, curled up together. He sat quietly by the fire, lost in his own thoughts. Things are like this now, so maybe it's fine, right? Papa won't cause the White Wolf disaster. He won't run into the strongest squad on the continent, won't become a demigod, and won't become my sworn enemy. No, maybe I'm overthinking it. It's safer to get rid of her now, before anything else happens. Thinking it through, he drew his sword and turned to look at Papa, still lying there, holding tightly onto the fur of her mother. A faint smile was on her lips as she murmured, "Thank you." He stared at her, his hand raised, ready to strike and end Papa's life in an instant. He hesitated for a moment, then sighed, quietly telling himself, or maybe I'm just overcomplicating things. With that thought, he shifted his gaze to the person lying next to Papa, silently calculating. The Saintess will definitely be praised for bringing back the victory, and the situation will become much safer. The person returning with her is Papa. With the Saintess's nature, she won't let Papa come to harm. Compared to killing her, she brings more uncertainty. Keeping her close to the Saintess might actually be the best choice. The Holy Maiden, who seemed to be drifting in and out of consciousness, appeared to be waking up. She sat up and called out to the Black Knight. At that moment, he had turned his face toward the fire. Upon hearing her, he responded, "Lady Holy Maiden, you're awake. We're safe now. They won't be able to send any pursuers after us for a while. By the day after tomorrow, we should be back in the land of the Spirit King, he replied while holding a branch over the fire. He glanced at Papa, then continued, also, that child is severely injured. I could only treat her wounds in a basic way to ease her pain. Without your healing magic, I'm afraid she may not wake up. Polly gently touched the hair of the person lying there, heart aching, and whispered, Polly. She was worried. What should she do? The magic she could use now was so limited, she couldn't heal such a serious injury. It seemed like she had no choice but to try something else. With that thought, she turned to the Black Knight and said, Sir Black Knight, could you, go somewhere else for a bit? Take a walk or something? He sensed something was wrong and replied, even though we're safer now, there are still many uncertain factors around us. Plus, Papa's condition is unstable. If we separate carelessly, it could be dangerous. Is something wrong? She blushed and whispered, no, there's nothing wrong. Well, if it's you, Lady Holy Maiden, then it's fine. With that, Polly began to undress. Slowly, she removed her clothes until there was hardly anything left. The Black Knight noticed the silence and glanced behind him. He couldn't understand what was going on, so he widened his eyes and let out a grunt. When he finally understood the situation, he shouted, why are you starting to take off your clothes? He then turned back toward the campfire. Polly was startled by the sudden shout and nervously explained, It's because my magic power isn't enough right now, so I have to use physical contact to transfer it and heal Papa. Don't worry, this is just an emergency solution. Also, since Papa is a girl, that's why I'm doing this. Polly gave a reasonable explanation and turned to continue. The Black Knight felt himself burning with embarrassment, his nose even starting to bleed. He quickly covered his nose with his hand, still protesting loudly. Who needs you to reassure them? I didn't ask you about this. Polly, noticing something was wrong, worriedly asked, Sir Black Knight, you're bleeding. Are you hurt? He waved his hand and interrupted her loudly. All right, I'm fine. Just turn your face away and you can get back to healing Papa. She quickly covered the important part of her body with her hands, feeling embarrassed and thinking to herself. Even though she had turned away, it was still so embarrassing. But she bent down, took off everything still on Papa, then helped him sit up, holding him tightly so their bodies were in contact, quietly reminding herself to hide her embarrassment. Staking Papa was more important. Polly held Papa as he slept, comforting him. In her dream, she cried out, Mom! Polly softly asked Morla, who was standing by the fire, Sir Black Knight, do you know how people in the church treat beastmen? He replied, I've heard of it. She said sadly, in the doctrine, beastmen are those abandoned by the gods. They follow a heretical and evil faith, so they are driven out of every kingdom. But do those beastmen deserve to be treated that way? And what about the children who are slaves from birth, just because their parents were slaves? Should it really be like this? The holy staff of gold reminded her, Saint, this is something already laid out in the doctrine. You shouldn't touch it. The air seemed to freeze at his words. Lucifer Morla listened to the holy staff of gold, then continued, not to mention that you are now rejecting it. He paused and said, I don't fully understand these matters, but I always believe that every person is born equal. Polly asked in surprise, every person is born equal? Equal in what way? Lucifer Morla explained, if we accept that everything in this world is created by the will of the gods, then in the eyes of the Creator, our kings, nobles, even the Pope and commoners, servants, and even slaves all the same. Polly couldn't believe it and said, are the king and the Pope really equal to slaves? That doesn't make any sense. He replied, Lady Saint, if there's no equality, do you really think the gods are fair and just? He looked up at the starry sky and continued, the sky nourishes both the towering trees and the weeds. To them, the sky might be like a god, but does the sky distinguish between a tree and a weed? A drop of rain hangs on a leaf. If rain is a gift from the gods to the world, is it truly fair and just? The golden scepter shouted, this is a terrible, blasphemous thought. This must be the kind of words that demons from hell speak. No, not even the demons would say something like this. Lady Saint, don't let yourself be deceived. Polly seemed to snap back to reality. She patted his shoulder and called out, Sir Black Knight. She leaned against his arm, hesitated, and asked, so, what does this all mean? Sir Black Knight, even though I sense there's something profound here, I'm still confused. Lucifer Morla pushed her arm away, blushing slightly and saying, I think, instead of being confused, you should probably put your clothes back on first. She blushed in surprise, her heart racing. Suddenly, Polly grabbed his head and slammed it down into the ground, tossing him away. She shouted, I'm so sorry. She stood there dumbfounded. What did I just do? She rushed over and asked, Sir Black Knight, are you okay? Lucifer Morla waved her off. I'm fine. Just let me rest for a moment. He held out a black envelope and said, if we move fast, we could return to the Allied Forces territory by tomorrow afternoon. This is highly classified military intel from the Demon King's army. I'm giving it to you now. Polly asked, military intel? Lucifer Morla confirmed, yes, the Demon King's army has sent all their main forces to the Demon Corridor and the Stalker Path. If we manage to slip through those two places and attack, we could turn the tide of the battle. She opened the map and exclaimed, if I remember correctly, isn't the Demon Corridor and the Stalker Path completely useless? Why would the Demon King's army send such a huge force to protect these rundown areas? He smiled slyly and thought to himself, of course, this was all my plan. Polly, still suspicious, asked, and another thing, why did you give me such important intelligence? Are you, the Black Knight, not going to the Holy Land with us? Lucifer Morla hesitated. In his mind, he cursed, Dan, am I supposed to go to the Holy Land with you and confess? He slowly sat up and tried to manipulate the situation. Lady Saint, I'll only go where I'm supposed to. You shouldn't try to search for me, because I'm right here among the crowd. Maybe one day we'll meet again, but maybe we won't. She couldn't say anything more. The next morning, everyone continued on their journey. Lucifer Morla held Polly's hand, leading her across the bridge. Papa was bouncing around, which made him sigh and pick the little one up. As they walked, Lucifer Morla stopped and called Lady Saint. Looking at the city in front of them, he said, we've reached the end. Papa and Polly moved toward the city gate. The guards signaled for them to stop. Who are you? Polly spoke softly. Don't worry, I'm Polly, the Saintess of the church, and this is my companion. Papa, this is the Black Knight, but he's vanished. She was surprised and let out a soft gasp. Looking toward the forest, Polly quietly wondered, has he left already? The Black Knight? The guards exchanged looks. The Saintess? Could it be? One of the soldiers said, don't say another word, I'll stay here. You go notify the others. The other soldier agreed, got it. Polly reassured Papa, don't be afraid. This is the coalition's headquarters. We're safe here. The guard hesitated, buying some time. Sorry, I can't trust you so easily. After all, this is the front line, and behind us is our homeland. She waved her hand. It's okay. I understand your situation. He noticed the staff behind Polly and asked, what's that? She replied, this might prove my identity. It's a holy relic of the church that I reclaimed from the Demon Lord's city, the golden staff. The soldier's face darkened. Do you expect me to believe that this is a holy staff? She blushed slightly and said, I guess it really is a bit hard to believe. The golden staff of the church trembled in anger and spoke, could you two be a little more polite? He stared in shock and, clutching the light magic staff, asked, then you must recognize this light magic spell, right? Covered by the light of magic, the guard exclaimed, this is definitely the magic of the church. It seems like you really are him. His face changed dramatically and shouted, it's that Saintess. Behind him, the city gates opened with a loud cry, where's Polly? She cheerfully called out, Teacher Roaster, I can't believe you're stationed here. It's been so long since we last met after parting ways at the Holy City. You're still my history teacher, right? He didn't pay attention to what she said and waved his hand, shouting, Grand Magic Cannon, steal the spell. Polly blinked in confusion, asking, Teacher Roaster, what's this for? The Golden Scepter answered, it can strip away all divine power from the sealing spell. It's trapped inside the magic. Polly gasped, wait, could it be? Roaster held up a wanted poster and shouted, a traitor who betrayed the Allied forces to serve the Demon King's army. They've committed all kinds of unforgivable heretical acts and were directly responsible for the fall of the undefeated fortress. Caught in the light of the magic, Polly helplessly said, this must be a mistake. How could I ever serve the Demon King's army? Even Lord Scepter can prove that. The Golden Scepter beside her seemed just as confused. He didn't care and continued to give orders. Now arrest them under the decree of the heretical court, which is under the direct authority of the Holy See. Papa, enraged, lunged forward. Polly, feeling flustered, responded, I didn't betray the alliance. How could Dorothy be a Saintess? She's clearly just a Saintess in training. Behind them, Dorothy spoke up, surprised, aren't you? Hello, Polly, it's so nice to see you again. She arrogantly said, this meeting truly makes one feel emotional. A guard eagerly ran over, flattering her. Lady Saintess Dorothy, what brings you here in person? She put on a saintly expression and replied, I have a few things I'd like to discuss with this female prisoner. Could you please hand me the cell key and step out for a while? The guard respectfully handed her the key and said, of course, but please be careful. The female beast woman inside is very fierce. Dorothy smiled warmly and said, thank you. The guard added, I'll stay on watch outside, so I'll be right here if you need me. As soon as the soldier was out of sight, Dorothy immediately dropped her smile, pointed with her finger, and used magic to silently open the cell door. With a satisfied grin, she said, magic is truly convenient. No one outside can hear a thing. This is the perfect moment to reveal my secrets. She lowered her gaze and spoke, you must have a lot of questions, don't you? Polly furrowed her brow and responded, it seems like you have a lot to say to me. She stepped closer, teasing, but looking at you now, are you still the same Polly I used to follow? Dorothy touched her, then continued, "With these chains restricting your magic, how are you any different from a mere mortal and this dull outfit?" With that, she tore the clothes apart, looking satisfied. "Not bad, now this looks more like a prisoner." Seeing Polly completely naked, Dorothy said, "All right, Polly." She then cupped Polly's breasts and added, "Next, I'll answer all your questions." Dorothy recalled her childhood, remembering the times she would pray with her hands clasped at the holy ceremony. She thought to herself, "Back then, I believed the world was simple. If I obeyed, I'd receive praise. If I worked hard, I'd be rewarded." But as the third princess of the Pampona Empire, such illusions didn't seem to exist. She frowned in frustration. "From a young age, I never saw my mother. She was probably a palace maid. I was born because of a mistake the emperor made when he drunkenly slept with her." Dorothy recalled the contemptuous looks that were always directed at her back then. From the moment she was born, she was labeled as an illegitimate child, shameless, and cursed. This stripped away all the possibilities for her own path and forced her into a single direction, being pushed into the church to become a nun, worshipping some meaningless god. At that time, she was determined and thought to herself, "But I won't give up. I haven't taken it step by step, climb higher and higher. From being a nun in a small parish, I'll make my way to the holy city, and eventually, I'll be chosen as a reserved saint. Who knows? Maybe I'll become the next saint." But even though she tried so hard, she could only stay stuck in place. In the end, the church found out her true identity. They allowed people from the royal family to rise to high ranks within the church. Didn't that mean the church would become just a tool for the secular royals? Once again, fate mocked her, and because of her lowly origins, she could only watch as other nuns took her place and became saints. However, just when it seemed like there was no hope, an opportunity for change appeared. A huge attack came with the demon army invading. It stirred up the stagnant waters, and the old system of rules fell apart and collapsed. In order to survive, the human church and other races had no choice but to sit down and weave alliances together. At this moment, a child who had once been looked down upon and discarded like me seemed to suddenly hold a significant role, as if she could shake the very foundations of the world. Standing between two powerful forces, the Pope and the Empire, she became an important link. The Empire's princess became the Saintess of the Church. In a critical time, the Pope gained support from secular forces that had no ties to religion. The Empire, too, was able to insert a crucial ally into the church, something they hadn't been able to do for thousands of years. She wondered, is there anyone else who could strengthen the bond between the Pampona Empire and the church more than I can? Dorothy raised her chin proudly. She said, "The world only needs a brave and charitable Saintess. This Saintess has completed her mission of infiltrating perfectly, bringing the divine artifact back, and at the same time, she is the princess of the human empire, able to link the church and the empire together." She then glanced at Polly, who was tied up and wearing tattered clothes, her eyes showing a hint of sarcasm. Dorothy continued, "For a Saintess of such noble status to go to the Demon Lord's village and retrieve the holy staff, no matter how you look at it, this isn't an ordinary plan. No wonder Sister Polly is so kind-hearted. Without any suspicion, she jumped straight into this trap that was already set. Actually, from the very beginning, you've been tricked by everyone." Papa gripped the iron bars tightly and shouted, "I won't let any of you touch the Saintess." She was in the cell across from him, so furious she could barely stand it. The wooden shackles locked her hands, and her head kept banging against the bars. Dorothy turned around and shifted her attention to her. She looked down at the beast woman with disdain and sneered, "Filthy beast. Who's the Saintess now? It's laughable." With that, she stepped toward the door, feeling quite pleased with herself. "That's enough for today. Sister Polly, when you're burned alive on the pyre, I'll be standing nearby, enjoying the show." However, Polly called out, "Wait a minute." Dorothy was taken aback and turned with a mocking smile. "What's this? Are you begging for mercy? But it's not me who wants you dead. It's the high-ranking officials of the Holy Church of the Divine." At that moment, Polly slowly opened her hand, which she'd been clenching tightly. Inside, there was a letter. "I just have one request. I have one last piece of important intelligence about the Demon King's army. If we use it well, the war against them will turn around immediately." Dorothy couldn't understand. She was about to die, yet now she wanted to share information that could help them. Hesitantly, she asked, "Aren't you scared? They want to kill you, so why would you still give them intel to help them?" Polly, hearing this, shouted, "Whether they kill me or not is my problem, but whether we can drive the Demon King's army away affects everyone in this land." At the Grand Castle, Morla gazed out at the scenery, feeling relieved as he said, "I'm finally home." He held a glass of red wine in his hand, a smirk on his lips as he thought, now the Saintess wouldn't be in danger anymore, right? And with the information he gave her, she would be celebrated as a saint for her great deeds, while he himself was sent back home. It really was a win-win situation. He took a sip of wine, unable to hide his excitement. Afterward, he set the glass down and muttered, "But I still can't get too happy too soon. My false identity got me defeated in that battle. The Demon King's village is probably in ruins right now. They'll leave me to go comfort them a bit." As soon as she stepped into the room, her foot brushed against a rope, and she noticed that the entire room was surrounded by coils of rope. Seeing him, she was taken by surprise. "Ah, Your Highness, you're finally out." "Congratulations." Morla was stunned. She stared at her, then instinctively shouted, "Flem, what in the world are you playing at here?" She held the rope in one hand and adjusted her glasses with the other as she tried to explain. "I deserve to die for this," she stammered. "I wasn't strict enough in my duties and let prisoner Polly get rescued from the cell." She glanced awkwardly at the rope in her hand and said, clearly embarrassed, "So, originally, I wanted to tie myself up here and wait for you to arrive so you could punish me. But tying myself up seems to be a bit harder than I thought." He placed his hand on her waist, making her shiver, then gently reassured her, "Flem, you can't blame yourself. If even you couldn't hold off the enemy, then they're not ordinary people anymore. I was the one who underestimated the humans. I didn't expect anyone to have such impressive strength." With that, he personally untied the rope around her, and she was deeply moved by his generous forgiveness. "Your Highness," she whispered. Just as the two of them were untangling the ropes, they heard footsteps approaching. The person who appeared spotted him and exclaimed, "Ah, Lord, you've finally emerged. This is wonderful." Asina rushed forward, her face lighting up with joy as she cheered upon seeing him. Morla looked at her with a hint of confusion and asked, "Asina, is there something you need from me? If the materials are running low, just go ahead and pick what you need from the warehouse." She shook her head and said, No, I'm here to deliver good news to His Majesty the Emperor." Asina smiled brightly and announced, "The new weapon that can change the course of the war is ready. It's been completed. I'd like to invite you to personally review it." At the research and development lab for the Demon King's military, he and Flem arrived. Morla glanced around anxiously, feeling a little uneasy as he thought, "No way, have they really finished it?" He turned to Flem and asked, "Where's Priscilla? She's the chief engineer. Why isn't she here?" Flem looked slightly embarrassed, then pointed to the wooden crate next to him. "Ah, she's right next to you." Morla was puzzled and turned to look at the crate. "Next to me? Isn't that just a barrel of wine?" As he was still scanning the area, the wine barrel suddenly popped open and a voice, slightly slurred, floated out. "Well, isn't this the Demon King? Care for a drink?" He jumped in surprise, instinctively raising his hand to shield himself, thinking there's another barrel of wine inside. Priscilla was lying among the wine bottles, her face flushed from drinking too much. Her voice was a little unsteady as she spoke. "Are you worried about that weapon? Don't worry, you'll definitely be worried about." "Ah." Morla broke into a cold sweat, feeling helpless as he thought, what is going on here? After thinking for a moment, he raised his finger to his chin, pondering. "But looking at you like this, I feel completely at ease." With that thought, he couldn't help but smile, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. A little while later, Asina stepped forward, holding the weapon she had just crafted. "Asina's here," he said. He turned to look at her. She was wearing a windshield and proudly holding up a large gun, clearly ready to go. She gritted and said, "We can start now." He squinted, watching carefully. What she was holding was a gun, but then Morla took a deep breath and calmed his mind, quietly chuckling to himself. "I see. For this world, guns are still pretty new, but they're just a novelty. After all, this is a world where magic exists. Even low-level stone bullet magic can have effects similar to modern guns. Experienced adventurers can easily swing a sword to cut a bullet in midair, and some are even faster than the bullets themselves. And that's not even mentioning the military here. Everyone's wearing armor made from stainless steel." Asina aimed the gun, preparing to fire, and both he and Priscilla watched closely. He looked back at the weapon, thinking to himself that this was the result of her tirelessly working herself to exhaustion, perfectly replicating the design to craft it. The two of them looked forward, sharing the same thought. But even if she ended up making a piece of junk, he'd still have to praise it as an unparalleled divine weapon. Asina let out a deep sigh, then immediately pulled the trigger. The wall across from them exploded, sending rocks and debris flying everywhere. He and Priscilla, standing off to the side, froze in place, their faces twisted in shock, looking almost like potatoes, completely stunned by the blast, and they could only manage to let out a startled noise. Asina, holding the gun she had just fired, turned around and looked at him with eager eyes. "Your Highness, this is the super weapon developed to end the war, designed under the guidance of the chief engineer. I've made a few minor adjustments. The gun." Both of them stared at her, sweat pouring down their faces as they stood frozen in place. Priscilla, horrified, screamed inwardly, "You call this a minor adjustment?" He stood beside her, sharing the same expression, and asked, "You call this toy a gun?" At that moment, Morla stepped forward, hesitating before asking her, "All right, this is amazing. This is it, right? Just this?" When he asked, Asina looked up. "Huh?" Asina grinned widely, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Of course not. As someone who believes in peace, my hope is to use weapons like this to quickly end the war. But with just this gun, which can only fire 7 shots in a row, it's still far from enough." Hearing that, Morla's previously calm mood instantly exploded. He coughed violently. 7 shots in a row, huh? Asina continued, "That's why I've designed something else." As she spoke, they heard a sound drawing closer to them. He turned and looked over, his eyes immediately widening at the sight in front of him. A massive tank was approaching with 2 muscular goblins driving it. The pace at which technology is advancing is just too fast. However, he could notice the awkward, slightly anxious atmosphere surrounding Priscilla. Asina bent down respectfully and said, "Without the ideas from the chief engineer and all the technical guidance and suggestions they gave me, there's absolutely no way I could have created this weapon. So it's all thanks to the chief engineer, Lady Priscilla." She was so terrified by this praise that her face turned pale. She quickly denied it. No, it wasn't me, don't say that." Flem also bowed deeply, his large chest shaking slightly. "Your Highness, at first, I didn't understand why you assigned this important task to Priscilla and Asina, but the results have proven that your foresight is unmatched. Actually, I had personally checked the weapons before, but I never reported it because I wanted to surprise you, Your Highness." Morla grabbed his messy hair in frustration and sighed, a surprise. Truly a surprise. But something this intricate, surely it can be produced in large quantities, right? Her answer hit him like a bombshell. "At the moment, we produce 100 units and they've already been deployed on the battlefield." He covered his face and shouted, "What?" Flem continued his report. "Furthermore, following your earlier instructions about defense, they've all been deployed along the Lima corridor and the Stalker Trail." Morla snapped to attention, completely caught off guard. "Huh." Then he sighed with a sense of relief. Phew, so it was these 2 useless spots. Fortunately, he had already given all the intelligence to the Saintess earlier. He crossed his arms and walked calmly, his heart filled with determination. This time, nothing could possibly go wrong, right? He remembered when he handed the intelligence to Polly. The sealed envelope was placed in front of her. If things went quickly, he could be back in the Alliance's territory by tomorrow afternoon. "This is a top-secret military intelligence report from the Demon King's army. I'm giving it to you first," he had said. Polly tilted her head and asked, "Military intelligence?" He confirmed without hesitation. The Demon King's army had concentrated 9/10 of its forces. By securing the Lima corridor and the Stalker path, they could close off those 2 spots and change the course of the situation. Back in the dungeon, Polly spread her hands out. "I only have one request. I also have one final piece of critical intelligence about the Demon King's army. If we use it properly, our war with them will immediately turn in our favor." The confusion and fear inside Morla only grew. Now he remembered the intelligence he had given to the Saintess. At this moment, in the Lima corridor, the surroundings were eerily quiet, stained with blood everywhere. In the distance, hundreds of thousands of soldiers lay dead, their bodies mutilated. The forest was burning down to the ground. This horrific scene was caused by the terrifying weapons of the Demon King's army. In the room, Dorothy questioned Polly. "How did you know that at the end of the Lima corridor, there was an army of demon lords?" She asked, surprised, "What happened?" She bit her hand, clearly anxious, and said, "It's completely ruined. A coalition of over 100,000 humans, dwarfs, and elves, organized by General Scott, fell into an ambush by the Demon Lord's army. The entire force was wiped out. Only a few dwarfs managed to escape by cutting through the dense forest." Polly was horrified when she heard the number, over 100,000. She gripped the door tightly and shouted, "Didn't I send you the intel already? Why didn't they still choose that route? That's over 100,000 soldiers." Dorothy responded thoughtfully, "Of course, I passed on the message clearly, but the original army was encouraged by the elves and dwarfs. That route was the best option for an attack. They didn't trust your intel and stubbornly decided to launch the assault." Dorothy clenched her lips and added that General Scott had also perished on the battlefield. The Princess of the Elves had gone missing as well. "This isn't my fault, right? It's not your fault, but no matter what, someone has to take responsibility for all of this." Dorothy's face darkened and she raised her hand to block out the noise. She gestured for silence, then intentionally shouted loudly enough for the soldiers around to hear. "Polly, I really can't imagine how you could do something so cruel. What kind of transformation have you undergone in that demon army to become like this?" Dorothy, with an air of unwavering authority, continued, "Why would you want to feed us false intelligence? Whether it's me, Master Roaster, or even General Scott, we all believe that deep down you still had some decency left. We trusted the information you gave us." Polly gasped, "You?" Before she could say anything more, Dorothy kept accusing her. We believe your claim that the Lima corridor had no Demon King's army coming from that direction. But in reality, there were hundreds of thousands of Demon King's soldiers laying in wait. Every one of them fought valiantly. General Scott even led his troops into battle himself. But after a full day and night of fierce fighting with no more ammo or supplies, they all perished. They died because of you. The soldiers around us are furious and want to tear you apart. Using her magic, Dorothy sealed Papa's mouth. Papa was silenced, unable to speak or defend himself. Still, Dorothy went on without pause. Sister Polly, no, Colonel Polly, considering the unforgivable crimes you've committed, including but not limited to espionage, crimes against humanity, and the brutal slaughter of countless lives. Dorothy delivered the verdict with cold precision. The Supreme Order Coalition has convened and sentenced you to death by fire. She looked down at Polly, who was bound by magical restraints on the ground, and declared, you will be executed in 3 days. In another place, Priscilla was sitting on a wine barrel, shouting, where's the wine? Give me the wine. Behind her, Lucifer Morla spoke up to comfort her. Priscilla, I understand your hard work, and I know you've thought about this a lot, but you still need to take care of yourself. She cried, whining to the demon lord, stop with the cruel, twisted pleasure of rubbing salt in my wounds. You've won this game, haven't you? Aren't you trying to make me serve your army? Fine, I give up. Just let me drink and I'll leave everything in my head to your demon army. Priscilla screamed, destroy it all. I don't care about this world anymore. Behind her, Morla felt a jolt of fear. He broke into a cold sweat and said, you're inner turmoil. Don't you dare rebel. Quickly start using that twisted brain of yours to come up with some useless tricks. I'm suffering so much already. Lucifer Morla pulled out a piece of paper and tried to persuade her. I know you're struggling. Starting today, step away from all the research and development. As for the chief engineer position, just let Asina handle it. She looked up, stunned, and exclaimed, ha. He pointed to the map and continued, right now, I will grant you the Granville Kingdom. You can head straight to the fief and rest there. Priscilla couldn't believe it and asked again, really? You want to give me a territory near the border? She secretly calculated that the area was so close to the border that she could cross it in just a few steps. Did he really think she wouldn't try to escape? Lucifer Morla replied, absolutely sincere. Inside, he thought, hurry up and run already. I'm worried if you stay with Asina for a few more days, she might end up turning even a tank into something she can use. Just then, Flem came running in shouting, Your Majesty. She happily announced, we've received good news from the front. The Allied forces have indeed sent over 100,000 troops through the Lima corridor to launch a surprise attack, but they immediately ran into our fully equipped army. Flem, excited, continued, the machine guns that Lady Priscilla and Lady Asina researched and built played a crucial role. In an instant, they burned through more than half of the enemy forces. She was clearly thrilled and added, Lady Priscilla's reputation has spread across the entire dimension. After hearing that, Priscilla was so terrified she collapsed, clutching her head in shock. Flem was startled and rushed over, calling out, it's him. Lucifer Morla, unwilling to accept it, said, she's just too happy, that's all. Flem, confused, gasped, ha! His Majesty, the Demon King? He was on the verge of tears, saying, don't worry, these are also my tears of joy. Inside, he screamed, why did we win? Why did we really attack that place? Didn't I give the Saintess the intelligence report? Where did I go wrong? Flem, deeply moved, immediately said, actually, His Majesty has even more good news. Lucifer Morla, feeling like he was on the brink of death, asked weakly, more? Flem, with excitement, replied, the Allied forces think the Saintess is a traitor to humanity, so they plan to burn her alive in front of the public. Upon hearing this, both Priscilla and Lucifer lost all will to live. Flem was shocked and cried, ah, His Majesty. Lucifer Morla quickly ran off. He shouted a few instructions. I had a new realization. I'm going into seclusion for a few more days. You and Minnows will be responsible for all the major and minor matters in the Demon King's army from now on. Flem was stunned by the command, huh? In his heart, he thought, Saintess, I will definitely save you. On the road leading to the execution ground, Polly's hands were tightly shackled with iron chains. Her torn clothes hung loosely, and she was escorted by a knight with Dorothy following closely behind. The curious townspeople stood behind the rows of knights, watching with eager eyes. They whispered among themselves, that's the traitor Polly. Why did she betray humanity? A stone suddenly flew out of the crowd, hitting Polly in the head. Reflexively, she raised her hands to shield herself. A furious voice immediately screamed at her, you wicked woman, you. A man from the crowd, filled with rage and hatred, shouted at her, because of you, my brother died on the battlefield. As he yelled, Polly raised both hands to cover her face. The knight escorting her and Dorothy walked by. Seeing this, Dorothy secretly smirked with satisfaction. Did you see that? Sister Polly, no one cares about your story. The people are all fools. From now on, they'll only remember Saint Dorothy. As for you, you'll be tossed into the trash bin of history forever." She thought cruelly to herself, walking behind while quietly observing Polly, who was slowly walking ahead of her. Polly's face was filled with sadness, and she had a wound from the stone that had hit her. Her clothes were torn, and her hands were still shackled in cuffs. Lucifer Morla, dressed in the dark armor of a knight, stood behind the crowd of townspeople, silently listening to their comments. "That's Saint Dorothy," one of them whispered. "She's the saint who snuck into the demon lord's village, played with the demon army, and spun them around like toys. I also heard that Saint Dorothy took a divine artifact right in front of the demon lord." He listened to the ongoing discussion for a while, his arms crossed, staring at the group of people who wouldn't stop talking. He couldn't help but feel incredibly confused. Isn't everything they're talking about something Polly did? Where did this woman Dorothy come from, and what kind of monster is she? This is getting serious. There's no storyline about the Saintess returning to the battlefield in the game. I didn't expect there to be such a big twist here. He kept thinking to himself, furrowing his brow. But I also feel a bit lucky. At least I managed to get some intel, he quietly thought to himself. Then his eyes landed on the yellow-bound book from earlier, and he suddenly felt uncertain. But as he recalled the scene, he remembered meeting a strange man, dressed in tattered clothes, carrying an old, worn-out bag by his side, and holding that same yellow book in his hands, eagerly trying to sell it to him. I've had exclusive sketches showing why the Saintess served the Demon King and plotted to harm over 100,000 soldiers. No lies here, just 666 copper coins. The Demon King recalled the moment and opened the book in his hands. As he glanced at its contents, his mind was still buzzing with questions. Could this sales pitch actually have some real intel? Damn that Demon King. One of the lines of text jumped out at him. Inside the pages of the book was an image of Polly, tightly bound in a seductive manner, struggling on the grass, her mouth yelling loudly. "Let me go. Do you think I'll submit to your perverse power?" The next image showed her face flushed red, her eyes filled with hearts as she hugged her face and shyly said, "It's too big. I'm going to die. I won't ever come back like this. I'm sorry. Holy Pope, I'm sorry." Then there was an image of Polly in sheer pleasure, lost to desire, her hands clutching her chest, crying out, "Please, if you put that in, I'll do whatever you want." The book was suddenly thrown forcefully to the ground. Lucifer Morla, stunned, shouted in disbelief. How the hell is this world selling such special grace? He frowned, clearly troubled, but his eyes kept glued to the book on the ground. After a moment of hesitation, he followed his conscience, picked the book back up, and opened it again. He also put on a pair of black glasses to further hide his face, then began reading while constantly assessing it. Actually, this style of painting isn't bad. Wow, so that's what it is. Heh, amazing, wait, no. A voice in his head screamed to regain his rationality. Quickly, he slammed the book shut, carefully tucked it back into his coat, and began to think. Finally, it became clear. They believed that St. Polly had intentionally provided false intelligence under his encouragement to harm the Allied forces. He looked again toward the execution ground where the people of the city were gathering. At that moment, Polly was tied to a burning pyre. Beside her stood Roaster, holding a list in his hands. Lucifer Morla finally began to understand everything, but how could Polly have given false intelligence in this case? Was there a bigger plot behind it all? Roaster held the list and began reading. The prisoner Polly was charged based on the testimonies of many witnesses and overwhelming evidence. She was tied to a cross, her arms bound high. With a sad expression on her face, she silently listened as Roaster read out her accusations. She was arrested for defeat, betrayal, joining the Demon Lord's army, and committing acts of military rebellion. Polly knelt on the execution platform, gazing at the clergy in front of her and the people of the city gathered at a distance. The accusations against her echoed in her ears. In the Demon Lord's army, she repeatedly leaked our military intelligence. The enemy tortured our captured soldiers many times. She fought for the title of Saintess and committed numerous assassination attempts against the clergy. At the same time, when she still held the title of Saintess, she studied forbidden magic, including necromancy and cursed magic. The church representatives seemed to be sitting there, bored out of their minds. One of them, wearing a lace-trimmed robe, had a look of sheer frustration and disinterest on his face. "This is all just for show. Do we really need to drag this out?" A fat man sitting next to him, dressed in the uniform of the church leader, agreed with a grunt. "Why not just burn her already?" Meanwhile, another man, though sitting at the judgment table, spent the entire time staring into a hand mirror, adjusting his appearance. Finally, Roaster finished reading the list of accusations against Polly. Prisoner Polly has confessed to all her crimes. Now we sentence her to death by burning. At this, Polly's expression, which had been blank until then, suddenly shifted. She turned sharply to look at the priest beside her. Confessed on my own, she asked, surprised. Then, as if realizing something, her face twisted in anger. She shouted at him. Was it my fingerprint that you all forcibly took from me? She called out to everyone present, her voice full of defiance. I do not accept any of these accusations, and I will never repent for any unjust charges. You can hang me for your cowardly schemes, but I have never betrayed my faith, and I never will. Hearing this, Roaster felt a pang of guilt. He quickly raised his hand and silently cast a forbidden spell to silence her. Golden chains appeared from the air, swiftly wrapping around Polly's mouth to stop her from defending herself any further. He then walked over to the blazing fire pit, grabbed a burning log, and said to her, Polly, for the sake of the world's justice, you must die here. With that, he threw the torch straight at Polly, who was bound to the cross, her eyes wide with terror. At that moment, a loud thunderclap suddenly echoed through the sky, and with it, rain began to pour down. Everyone present was in disbelief, staring up at the sky. The fire, which had just started to ignite, was quickly extinguished by the rain, leaving everyone stunned. Murmurs of confusion began to spread through the crowd. Why is it raining all of a sudden? Could it be that even the gods don't want her burned to death? Roaster immediately raised his hand and began to cast a spell. A circle of fire burst from his palms, spinning continuously. He aimed the flames at Polly, who was tightly bound. The magical fire quickly surged up, surrounding Polly's entire body, causing her to scream in agony. Polly bit her lip, her eyes shut tightly in defiance as the flames began to scorch her body. Lucifer Morla stood among the crowd, watching the scene unfold with a thoughtful expression. He couldn't help but think that this was quite a dramatic spectacle, but if one took a closer look, it was clear there were many holes in the story. Yet no one seemed to question it. When the truth is unclear and people don't care to uncover it, the truth is easily buried in confusion, with countless hands working behind the scenes to keep it that way. He couldn't help but feel disappointed for the people in the city. The Demon King's army had already come to their doorstep, yet they still wanted to fight among themselves. As he walked forward, he mulled over his own plan. It was time for him to step in, take the Saintess away, and end this chaos once and for all. But as soon as he thought about chaos immediately erupted around him. Lucifer Morla was also taken aback by the sudden turn of events. What chaos? Around him, the people who had gathered on the wide land began frantically running. Lucifer Morla looked up, wary. A brilliant beam of divine light shone down from the sky, directly on the Polly, who was being blinded on the sacrificial pyre. Instantly, the flames that had been blazing around her quickly died down, and this miraculous event even made the Demon King, Lucifer Morla, gasp in shock. It was a sign of divinity. The bright golden light from above illuminated the scene. Roaster looked up in astonishment, murmuring in disbelief, how could this be? The divine power? It's so immense. It wasn't just him. Everyone present, struck with awe, looked up at the sky in shock. High Priest Roaster, Polly still burning in the cold flames, called his name. But just those simple words made Roaster fearfully glance at her. He quickly fell to his knees. In front of Polly, still blindingly illuminated, with her hands nailed to the cross and fire consuming her body, Roaster trembled as he knelt on the ground, unable to lift his head, stammering in response, "Ah yes, it's me." Polly seemed to be in a trance. With her eyes tightly shut, she calmly stood within the flames and asked Roaster, "Do you think this reign is fair? Is it righteous?" Roaster knelt before her, his voice trembling as he replied, yes, it's fair and just, because this reign doesn't care about rank or status. It falls for the poor and it falls for the rich. Polly glared down from above. Behind her was the brilliant golden light of celestial authority from the heavens. In a cold, sharp tone, she countered, "That's not how it is." Below the bright golden light, with sparks and ash filling the sky, the city lay in view. On one side, towering, glorious castles of gold and riches. On the other, decaying buildings housing the poor. Yet the rain kept falling relentlessly. The crowd before her stood stunned, staring up at Polly as if her words were coming down from the heavens themselves. "The rain is fair," she continued, her voice echoing. "It falls for the poor and it falls for the rich. But it is not just, because it falls for both the poor and the rich." At that moment, the flames of divine magic spread, engulfing Polly's entire body. Even the chains binding her were burned away by the fire, freeing her hands. Standing amidst the blazing flames, Polly's voice remained steady and deep. "Because the world it falls upon," she said, her eyes narrowing with a hint of frustration, "is not just." The flames of divine magic roared higher, sending waves of brilliant celestial light scattering around. The onlookers were left in awe and fear, their gazes fixed on the high platform. The light grew ever stronger and finally erupted, sending countless beams of light shooting out, piercing the heavens above. Polly had completely transformed. She was wearing a dazzling golden armor that glimmered with light, her hands tightly gripping the hilt of a sword. Her expression was unreadable, and her eyes still shone with a golden hue. She hovered high in the sky, her entire body encased in a golden armor, with 3 pairs of black wings extending behind her, shimmering with hints of gold. The sky around her was filled with a radiant glow. Her voice echoed across the sky, "I will judge." Polly's gaze, filled with determination and coldness, looked down below. Her hand still gripped the hilt of her sword as she delivered her judgment. This world. Everyone present was struck with terror by the scene before them, their screams incoherent. "It's—" Roster knelt on the ground, his face turning pale, finishing their words. "The fallen angel, High Priest Roaster." Polly remained suspended in the air, her form still surrounded by a brilliant glow. She looked down at Roaster with cold disdain. He raised his eyes in fear, staring at the angel above him, the golden sword in her hand shining brightly. Black feathers floated gently in the sky. Polly pointed her sword directly at him, her entire being radiating murderous intent as she declared, "You are guilty." The verdict was delivered, and Roaster's eyes widened in shock. Tears of fear uncontrollably streamed down his face. Suddenly, the upper half of his body exploded, leaving only a burst of blood spraying high into the air. The sight was so horrifying that it sent a chill through the crowd below, making them tremble in fear. From above, Polly looked down at the 3 representatives of the church who had just callously sentenced her. "You 3, you're so desperate to save yourselves that you don't care about your dignity. You panic and beg Polly. Wait, Polly, there's been some mistake. Someone must be wrongfully accusing you, right? Don't worry, you're still the Saintess. I'll make sure to restore your honor." Polly didn't even bother to listen to their pleading. Coldly, she declared guilty. She swung her sword in a few swift movements, and the 3 people before her were left in a spray of blood. Hovering high on the platform, with black wings glowing faintly with an ethereal light, she gripped her sword tightly like a god passing judgment, her presence commanding and unyielding. "You 2 and you?" She pointed to others. "You're all guilty." She raised her gaze, her eyes burning with determination, like a god declaring to the people of the city, "I, Polly, proclaim here and now that whether it's the Demon King's army or the allied forces under the control of those who act unjustly, they will all be subjects of my judgment." She stood high above, watching the chaos below as the crowd scrambled to flee. From her body, a glowing halo in flames as red as fire seemed ready to burn the very people running for their lives. Her voice, still cold, rang out, "Let them tremble for the wrongs they've done. Let them flee in fear of me, and those who were deceived without cause." As these words echoed, a brilliant light enveloped the head of a young soldier who was wounded and had lost an arm. He sat on the ground, his face filled with terror at the scene unfolding before him. A single feather gently fell beside him. The soldier, in shock, glanced down at his remaining hand, still believing that justice and righteousness could somehow stay here with him. The words seemed to come from the heavens themselves. The young soldier, in surprise, reached out with his other hand to touch the place where his arm used to be. A golden light passed over him, almost as if it had taken away his pain. Polly raised her sword high, pointing it toward the sky, now filled with divine light. 6 pairs of black wings unfurled behind her. Beneath her, a sea of red flames blazed as if burning away all the evil in the world. With a stance that radiated divine authority, she called out clearly, "Here, I'll establish the heavenly kingdom on earth." Dorothy stared from a distance at Polly standing in the glowing light, holding up her sword high. Beneath her, the bodies of those sentenced to death lay scattered in pools of blood. Furious, she shouted, "She's gone mad, completely mad." She clenched her fists, unable to hide the envy in her eyes as she looked at the scene, her anger building. "I'm not running away, I'm not scared of her. I am the chosen one. It should be me becoming an angel, it should definitely be me." Suddenly, a strong blow landed on the back of Dorothy's neck. A knight, without hesitation, grabbed the unconscious Dorothy and rushed out of the castle. Sorry, Lady Dorothy. Lucifer Morla, still in his dark knight attire, stood calmly amidst the chaos of people running for their lives. He thought to himself, "This is a mess. Why are they defying her? Polly's not even close to a fatal wound yet. She hasn't been messed with enough to fall into corruption. So how did she suddenly turn into a 6-winged angel?" He furrowed his brow as he studied Polly's angelic form, trying to recall the details he knew from the game. But in the game, there was no version of this. If she were a normal angel with white wings, he'd have fought her already. And she's saying she not only wants to face the Demon King's army, but also the allied forces. This doesn't seem like a bad result, though. Out of nowhere, a third force is emerging, one with semi-divine power to counter the Demon King's army. He glanced over at Polly again, continuing to think to himself. But Lucifer Morla walked up to Polly, standing with her beneath the brilliant heavenly light still shining in the sky, and cautiously spoke. "Lady Saintess, I'm still wary of you. I'm not sure if I can hide a heavy, dark aura of hell around me from her." Upon recognizing who had approached, Polly immediately brightened up. "Sir Dark Knight, you've come too. Thank you so much. Lucifer Morla smiled lightly, then through his mask spoke gently to her. No need to thank me. After all, I haven't really saved you this time. Polly didn't think his words were entirely true. She blushed slightly and quietly explained, No, that's not what I meant. Then she quickly placed her hands together in front of her, her face full of excitement as she eagerly explained to Lucifer Morla, I understood everything you said earlier, that all things in this world are created by the will of the gods, and because of that, people should be equal. If everyone is equal, then no matter who they are, they have the right to pursue freedom and happiness in life. With that, she looked at him with deep admiration in her eyes and continued speaking about the truths she had just realized. Everyone living in equality is so true. It really is so true. This is the highest and most profound truth of the human world. Lucifer Morlo was stunned by Polly's long speech and could only let out a soft sound of surprise. Polly was still in a state of excitement and reverence as she realized the new truth. Her eyes had now formed heart shapes and her hands were clasped in front of her chest, expressing her admiration for Morla. Taking your words as guidance, I will build a heavenly realm on earth where everyone is equal. There will be no distinction between nobles, clergy, commoners, or slaves. Here, humans, beastmen, elves, and dwarves can all live together in equality. She then extended her hand toward Morla as if inviting him. So, Black Knight, let's build this earthly paradise together. Let's overthrow the coalition order and defeat the demon king Lucifer. You, Morla, will lead us. Meanwhile, Lucifer Morla listened to Polly's words while glancing at the hand she had extended. A mysterious, radiant aura filled the space around Polly, and her black angel wings, framed by her golden armor, reached out with a sincere invitation toward Morla, dressed as the Black Knight. As the founder of this earthly paradise, Lucifer Morla remained silent, staring at Polly's outstretched hand. Yet, in his mind, questions kept swirling. How did she not notice the hellish aura I've been hiding? Her curved form seems like a liberated state in a game. But those black wings. While he was lost in thought, feathers continued to drift through the air around them. It seemed that Polly noticed his silence after a long pause. He stood still, only staring at her, and she hesitantly asked him, Won't you? Polly felt both regretful and embarrassed. She glanced away, her face turning slightly red, looking incredibly beautiful as she expressed her deep regret. Slowly lowering her hand, she spoke softly, almost apologetically. I'm so sorry. I was thoughtless. Of course, you have your own responsibilities. How could I ask you to fulfill such an impulsive request? Morla quickly reached out and took Polly's hand before it could pull away. No, he said. He raised her hand gently, slightly bowing, and in a formal gesture, he spoke to her. Please allow me to help drive the entire demon army out of this land. I cannot refuse. Then he looked straight into Polly's eyes, his expression serious. I have a specialized intelligence network within the demon army, which I can provide to you. Trust me, my abilities will be far more effective elsewhere than if I stay here waiting. Hearing this, Polly immediately felt a surge of joy. She clasped her hands together in front of her chest, her face lighting up with excitement, and quickly agreed with Morla. Of course I trust you. After all, you're the one who can say such things, and your intelligence is worth more than an entire army. She lowered her head again, thinking about the soldiers who had fallen in the recent battle. Her words were filled with sorrow and regret. If only the Allied forces had acted on the intelligence you gave us, if the high-ranking officials hadn't been so foolish and caught up in their own internal conflicts, then the battle in the Lima corridor wouldn't have cost so many lives. Slowly, she opened her eyes. Because of this, the 6 black wings once again spread wide behind Polly. The heavenly light from above shone down brightly, illuminating everything around her. Polly turned toward Morla and declared with determination, Things have to change. Meanwhile, in the holy temple at the sacred realm, 2 monks stood in the courtyard outside the door of a room within the temple, talking to each other. These are the most important rooms we need to inspect. With that, the 2 carefully opened the door. From the outside, the room was illuminated by several burning candles. The older monk, hands clasped behind his back, explained to his companion the significance of the candles in the room. Each candle represents the life of a high-ranking court member within the church's hierarchy. For example, the candle in the center that represents the supreme holy leader of the Tothin sect. The young monk curiously asked the older monk what happens if the flame goes out. The older monk calmly smiled and said, The candles here cannot be blown out unless the soul has departed for the heavens. The flame represents that person's soul, and it is only extinguished when the soul passes. As the old monk finished speaking, a candle beside the young monk suddenly flickered and went out. Right after he spoke, a series of candles on a nearby table all went out at once. At the cathedral, a loud scream echoed as the older priest was blocked by 2 knights. Stop, you disrespectful person, he yelled frantically at those inside. Something terrible has happened. The life flames of Chief Judge Edward, High Priest Roaster, and High Priest Fios have all been extinguished. Several other priests have also met with misfortune. At the cathedral, the voice of the old monk continued to resonate, aimed at a figure dressed in monk's robes, a hood pulled over their head, kneeling inside. The figure was a member of the highest order of the Holy Church. With both hands tightly clutching a golden crucifix, their head lowered slightly as they muttered, "Lord, is this the trial you have set before us?" At the Demon King's castle, Flem leaned on the balcony, gazing up at the powerful waves of purple magical energy sweeping across the night sky. In awe, he whispered, "Such a powerful magic." She couldn't take her eyes off the sky, sweating as she thought to herself, "Is the aura of a semi-divine level being from the underworld descending into this world? Why haven't I heard anything about this?" Flem immediately turned on her heel and charged into the castle, quickly making a decision. She needed to send someone to investigate this matter and report back to His Majesty the Emperor. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of the dwarves, two dwarfs were loudly arguing in the grand hall of the royal palace. One of them accused the other. "The alchemic weapon appearing in Linmut is a product of the Nobel clan. Your princess must have helped the demon army create it." The other dwarf quickly retorted, "You're clearly slandering her. Princess Priscilla would never betray us like that. Besides, you're only talking about the Nobel clan's weapon. There are still many unresolved key issues, and there's no solid evidence to back your claims." Before them, two guards stood silent, carrying out their duties. But it seemed that one of them could no longer hold his composure. Above the two arguing dwarfs, a hammer was tightly gripped in a hand and struck forcefully against the stone floor. King Him, the supreme king of the dwarves, sat on his throne, his long red beard and imposing armor giving him a commanding presence. He held the hammer tightly, furrowing his brow, and spoke to the two bickering dwarfs below. "Sending someone to investigate this will make things clear immediately." The two people immediately bowed their heads before the king sitting on his high throne. At that moment, Him suddenly felt a violent tremor throughout his body. He looked up at the ceiling, which had cracked from the shock, and anxiously whispered to himself, "This dark aura, it's terrifying. Ancestors, do you want to abandon your own descendants?" Meanwhile, in Hackland City, a beautiful fortress with a grand building designed in the style of Windroads stood proudly in the center, basking in the brilliant golden sunlight. A voice rang out. "Is it true that an evil lord is coming to take control of this place?" A father and son were talking. The son was staring at his father, asking for information. "Father, do you know anything about this?" the son inquired. The father, who was staring intently at the paper in his hand, hesitated before responding. I'm not sure. I've only heard that this person is very powerful. In the battle, he showed his strength with an army of 100,000. The son was immediately horrified. One person with an army of 100,000? This demon is way too terrifying. He doesn't eat humans every day, does he? Upon hearing his son's words, the father's face immediately darkened. At that moment, a voice called out, "The Lord is here." Right after, a clear and cheerful voice continued, "Hey, my people." The young boy, hearing this, glanced toward the source of the sound. Priscilla, wearing her special armor and crown shaped like a skull, stood with one hand on her hip and the other raised in a greeting. She boldly introduced herself. "This is our first meeting. I am Priscilla, the new Lord of Granville." The crowd fell silent, drawn in by her voice. After a brief moment of shock, they quickly grew angry and shouted at her, "Whose kid climbed up there? Get down here right now, or you'll be the first meal for the demons." Priscilla wasn't about to back down. Standing tall on the platform, she angrily shouted back, "You're the kid here, your whole family's kids." An older man, hearing her words, finally spoke up from behind a crowd. "Are you Princess Priscilla of the dwarf clan?" Upon hearing her name, Priscilla quickly responded. Standing on the high platform, she addressed the old man. "Oh my, it's been so long since I heard that name. It's just a title from my past now." Then, pointing directly at the father and son, she added, "Remember this, my title now is." Priscilla stood on the podium, her finger pointing toward the people in the temple, clearly declaring, "The chief engineer of the Dark Army's Research and Development Department, the official wine brewer for the Emperor, the greatest hero in the Lima Corridor battle, Lord Granville." The father and son exchanged a silent glance. In the Lord's mansion, a loud voice broke the silence. "What?" Priscilla was sitting behind the desk, papers stacked in front of her, along with a glass of beer. She stared in disbelief at the paper before her. The previous lords and nobles had already collected taxes up to 90 years ahead. Had they drained everything dry? The father and son stood quietly in front of Priscilla, and it was the father who spoke up. "It's exactly as you see, my lord." As he said this, both father and son showed clear signs of frustration. Upon hearing this, Priscilla immediately ordered, then completely waived the taxes for the next 3 years. "After all, I'm not here to make money." The father, somewhat incredulous, asked, "What? Are you serious?" Priscilla didn't respond directly. She simply placed the paper she had been holding on top of the pile on the desk and explained her plan to the two of them. This place is rich in minerals. I'll help you improve your mining and metallurgy techniques." Then she picked up another piece of paper and examined it closely. With her other hand, she grabbed a giant mug of beer and took a sip, continuing to speak to the two men. "Right now, the conditions are tough. We'll work according to a schedule of 3 days on, 4 days off. The salary will come from the jewels I carry with me, and the bonuses will be given out quarterly." The two men immediately dropped to their knees. "Huh?" Both father and son, without any coordination, bowed their heads repeatedly in front of Priscilla, shouting excitedly, "An angel! She's truly an angel!" The man exclaimed. His son next to him echoed in unison, "She's truly divine, isn't she?" Priscilla wiped the sweat from her forehead. Hey. The son then turned to his father as if trying to take credit and said, "Father, should we tell Lord about the scattered troops in the Lima corridor?" The father immediately agreed. Yes. A favor this big can't go unrewarded. This could be a great accomplishment for the Lord. Priscilla looked up at them, both snorting. The Lima corridor, scattered troops. That place was a dense forest, and someone with an unclear face appeared to be nervously looking around. From behind a large tree, with thick branches reaching high, a mysterious figure slowly emerged. Leaning back against the base of a tree, she lowered her head. "What's going on? What exactly are we fighting?" "That firepower. Is the main force of the Demon King's army really that simple?" She prepared to stand up. "I need to leave quickly. I remember there's a human settlement nearby. They must have noticed my presence by now, so I might get some help." She heard footsteps approaching from behind. She tensed. Could it be someone from the Demon King's army? How did they find me? Priscilla gripped her axe tightly and swung it swiftly, narrowly missing Herver's face. The massive tree she had been leaning on was instantly cleaved in half and fell to the ground. Luckily, since she was holding her staff, she wasn't affected too much. Herver was clearly confused. Who could possibly be strong enough to chop down such a sturdy tree so easily? Could it be a general of the Demon King's army? Priscilla stood on the fallen tree and looked down at Herver. "Oh, I thought it was someone important, but it's just a sharp-eared beast." "I've met you before." The two girls faced each other. The sharp-eared princess, Herver right. The short princess, Priscilla, "What are you doing here? Aren't you the idiot?" Herver pointed her axe at Priscilla. "Of course I'm here because I've been made the Lord of Granville by the Emperor's decree. And you? You're the one causing trouble and disrupting the peace on my land." Herver finally understood. "So it was you who betrayed the alliance." Herver grabbed the staff and began using magic. "Even though I don't know why, aren't you being a little too overconfident?" Vines and sharp thorns grew, responding to Herver's command. "Though both you and I are at level 9, the forest is the home ground of my kind, the spirits." Priscilla bared her teeth and laughed loudly. "Level 9, she said, planting her axe into the ground. Her eyes gleamed, and a glowing aura surrounded her as rooms began to appear. "Who said you and I are at level 9? Herver blinked in surprise. "That's the power of the runes." Priscilla smiled lightly. "You know quite a bit. Even though we, the creatures of this world, can't use magic, we have our own system of power, special runes." The runes spread across Priscilla's body. When carved onto a weapon, they unleash tremendous power. "So, what happens if they're carved onto a person?" The runes were engraved onto her hip. If it were a normal person, their flesh would probably tear apart in an instant. Only someone incredibly strong could withstand the fury of these runes. As the engraving process finished, this powerful individual was often referred to as. Herver exclaimed, "Level of Saint Realm? No way, we haven't been apart for that long, and you've already reached the Saint Realm." Priscilla explained, "It's just the Saint Realm, but in front of His Majesty the Emperor, it's nothing special. I just understood a little more about the greatness of His Majesty the Emperor. From that, I gained a small insight. Have you ever felt despair? No matter what you do, no matter how you try, everything is already part of His Majesty's plan. You move forward, you move back. Every step you take is within His design." In Priscilla's heart, the Demon Lord was like a puppeteer, and she was just a puppet, controlled and unable to escape, forced to compromise. Even though she wanted to fight against fate, deep in the shadows, countless threads bound her, pushing her along a preordained path. I've never even seen His Majesty's semi-divine power, but I live in constant fear of him every second. I've completely given up. If I can't fight back, then it's better to just go along with it. Priscilla sounded almost relieved, like she had been set free. After shedding those vague burdens, I realized my power has been continuously growing. Herver still tried to persuade her. "Priscilla, it's not too late to turn back. If you bring your Saint Realm power back to the Alliance, you'll be treated with respect. I hope you can see things clearly." Priscilla turned around and said, "You're the one who needs to understand the situation. But don't worry, I won't do anything to you." Her gaze was dark. After all, there were plenty of people who admired her kind, the type of spirit she was. She was the Dungeon Queen, the Demon Lord. Flem reported to the Demon Lord, the Imperial Prince has confirmed that internal conflicts within the Alliance led to the Saintess turning into a six-winged archangel. She adjusted her glasses. However, her wings are black, and her power is even purer than most of the fallen demons in hell. Though she's the Saintess, she has taken control of the entire city, yet she hasn't forced the civilians to stay. Those who want to leave are free to do so, and she's been providing travel money and food. We've also confirmed the rise of the Third Force. They want to fight the Demon Lord's army while we're focused on opposing the Alliance. This might be the only good news. Whenever the Imperial Prince enters seclusion, the situation tends to change drastically. Flem presented the information seriously. Morla raised his hand to signal for silence. I already know about this, Flem. It's not urgent right now, he said, his finger trembling slightly. But Priscilla, is she the only one who's brought us this surprise? Flem confirmed. Herver, blindfolded in her cell, shouted, "Dan, Demon Lord." She yelled, "Don't think that the noble spirits will bow to you because of this. The Spirit Clan and the Spirit Army will definitely defeat you." Here's the translated version. "Damn it," he muttered as he opened one eye, squinting through the blindfold. The image of the Demon King slowly became clearer. Shit, Herver thought, his eyes filled with awe. The Demon King is so handsome. As he looked at the figure behind the bars, he couldn't help but think about the person's entire life. Herver, one of the twin queens of the Sylph race, needed power within the game. Well, what was next? In the original version of the game, Herver appeared only as a background character in the twin pair. Even the sprite for her only showed up during the introduction of her younger sibling. Looking at Herver in front of him now, he saw how fragile she was. Morla thought for a moment, but someone like her couldn't be an ordinary character after all. Her role was that of a princess of the Sylphs. The image in his mind right now was of when the Demon King's army descended upon the realm, the Sylph's homeland. The Sylph race was one of the most invaded by the Demon King's forces. The death or corruption of a Sylph princess would be the final straw to crush the entire Sylph race. The entire Sylph realm would fall into ruin, and the Sylph gods would lose all control over the Gasma dimension. At that point, the impulsive, stubborn gods, just like the Sylphs themselves, would reveal themselves and personally step into the realm. Why does it always have to be this damn mechanical divine form? Are you really going to kill me, the player, without even thinking about the game's features? He gave the game the middle finger. At this moment, Herver spoke up, interrupting the Demon King's thoughts. You're the Demon King? He raised a hand to calm her. Yes, that's right. But don't worry, just treat this place like your own home. My demon army has always held the belief that guests should be treated with great care, so we'll treat you with respect. Herver turned her head away. Don't think I'll believe your nonsense. Instead of being a prisoner, I'd rather just end it all right now. Even if I can't do it immediately, I'll find a way to take my own life. Was he going to give up? The prisoners from the Holy Army were just as stubborn. Herver untied the ropes binding her, and with her arms crossed, spoke proudly. If you don't want me to kill myself, it's not impossible, but I have a condition. Flem, holding the rope in his hand, shouted angrily. How dare you? As a prisoner, you actually make demands. If it weren't for His Majesty's mercy, do you think you'd be leaving here unscathed? The Demon King raised his hand, signaling Flem to stop. All right, speak your condition. If it's about changing rooms, I can grant that request right now. As a princess of the Elf Kingdom, being in a place like this was definitely a bit uncomfortable. Flem still looked like he wanted to stop her, but Herver put on a mysterious air. She's still looking at him like that. Change rooms? How can I make such a simple request? The Demon King started to become wary. Oh, so you have a political request? Do you want me to adjust the placement of my army or pull out from a certain territory? He was laughing maniacally inside. Yes, make that request. As expected from a royal elven princess, your knowledge is impressive. Let's make it a big one. Hug me. Herver made her request, and the Demon King thought he had misheard. Her face was redder than a ripe tomato. All I asked is that you hug me for a moment, but you have to hold me tight. I promise I won't harm myself. That's my request. It's a bit unusual. The Demon King's face twisted with confusion, his mind spinning. He looked like a wild beast. Your Highness, this is absolutely not acceptable. This damned elf, is the elven race the one that hates my kind the most? I'm sure she has ill intentions. Lucifer Morla wasn't worried about Herver doing anything to him, since even if he stayed completely still, she couldn't break through his defenses. He only felt helpless, with no hope of any normal person being able to change the situation. He finally relented. So, you just want a hug, right? As soon as the words left his mouth, the two girls beside him reacted. One with satisfaction, the other with shock. The prison door opened and Flem was still staring wide-eyed. Herver stepped forward and the Demon Lord spread his arms. Then come here. Herver moved closer, wrapping her arms around him with the nature of a spirit. If she wasn't satisfied, she hinted she might really take her own life. Polly had already been affected by the situation, and now Priscilla was also becoming confused, making things even harder to understand. They definitely couldn't afford to make more enemies. He glanced at the person hugging him. Thankfully, it was just a hug. Herver is so happy to be embraced. It's wonderful. She was lost in the Demon Lord's arms, his handsome face, short white hair, elegant aura, and the faint scent of wood that surrounded him. How could he be the Demon Lord? He was clearly the man she had always thought about. His tall, straight figure. Despite the clothes, she could still feel the firmness of his body. Herver reached around behind the Demon Lord, and the curve beneath his clothes was undeniably exquisite. Suddenly, she squeezed his butt, making his ears and horns stand straight up. Around Flem, after witnessing this scene, an aura of darkness filled the air. She trembled with anger. You damn thing, an elf, a prostitute, and yet you dare to act on the Emperor's body. Herver didn't care about anyone else. She was eager to taste the Demon Lord's flavor. She let her tongue glide across his neck, startling Morla. As a witness to these actions, Flem was completely consumed by darkness.